Hello, my name is Dr. Tatyana Humle. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Anthropology and Conservation. I'm also a member of the Durrell Institute for Conservation Ecology here at Kent. As many of you might already know, La Planète des Singes, or The Planet of the Apes, was originally a French novel written by Pierre Boulle in 1963. And it was first adapted to the large screen in 1968. This period of the 60s coincided with the groundbreaking research of Dr. Jane Goodall and Professor Kinji Imanishi, who pioneered the first studies of wild chimpanzees, specifically in Tanzania, East Africa. These two remarkable primatologists broke the boundaries of science, not only giving names to individuals, but recognizing personalities and the complexity of social life in chimpanzees. They also challenged not only our preconceptions of what essentially makes us human, but long-held hallmarks of human uniqueness, such as our capacity to make and use tools and engage in warfare. The scientific community recognizes today that the term great apes include not only chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas and orangutans, but also humans. Wild chimpanzees specifically have a wide distribution across Africa, but this distribution is discontinuous across Equatorial Africa. They occur from southern Senegal, across the forest belt north of the Congo River, to western Uganda and western Tanzania. They occur in areas ranging from sea level as far up to 3,000 meters in altitude. They inhabit a range of habitats, primarily moist and dry tropical forests, but also savanna-dominated landscapes interspersed with riverine forest. In spite of more recent intensive survey efforts across much of the chimpanzee range, population estimates unfortunately still remain rather crude. The most recent estimate of total population size in Africa is about 170,000 to about 300,000 individuals. 4 geographically distinct subspecies are commonly recognized: the West African subspecies, the Central African subspecies, the Nigeria-Cameroon subspecies, and the East African subspecies. My research to date has primarily focused on the West African subspecies. In 1995, as a young second-year student of zoology, I joined a Japanese-run field site known as Bossou in Guinea, West Africa, run by the Primate Research Institute of the Kyoto University in Japan, under the auspices of Professor Tetsuro Matsuzawa, a leader in the study of chimpanzee cognition. Guinea was the first country to gain independence from France, and in spite of its large size, its prominent geographical location in West Africa, many people are quite unfamiliar with Guinea, until unfortunately the recent catastrophic Ebola epidemic, which recently hit the region. The Bossou research site was established in the mid-70s by Professor Yukimaru Sugiyama, and a small community of chimpanzees there inhabits primarily 4 forested hills surrounding the village of Bossou in southeastern Guinea at the border with Liberia and Côte d'Ivoire. I've been working in West Africa ever since 1995, focusing on chimpanzees in Guinea, but more recently also expanding my work into Sierra Leone. And both these countries, the majority of chimpanzees live outside protected areas. The first wild chimpanzee I ever encountered when I first entered the forest of Bossou was Tua, depicted here. Tua is still alive today, and he was then the chief or alpha male of the community. Now, over 50 years old, he is amongst the oldest member of his community. One might ask why the chimpanzees of Bossou have survived so long alongside people. In fact, the founding families of the Bossou village believe that chimpanzees are the reincarnation of their ancestors. And many families in the village also hold the chimpanzee as a totem animal, which means that they will neither kill, capture, or eat chimpanzees. So what have we learned since the 60s? It is very clear that we know that chimpanzees are social, but political, intelligent, and emotional animals. I always get reminded by the people of Bossou, often saying, chimpanzees are so like us. They laugh and smile. They also show abilities for social learning through observation of others and culture, where behaviors are passed on from one generation to the next, independent of environmental and genetic influences. They also have a high capacity to adapt to human-modified landscapes, if tolerated, and as long as habitat conversion and modification is gradual, as typically seen in agricultural landscapes where people practice slash and burn agriculture and leave land fallow for as long as 4 to 7 years. But times are changing. Local human demographic growth, increased demand for arable land, and shorter fallow times are some of the elements changing local landscapes. What may have previously been termed a harmonious coexistence between people and chimpanzees in many areas now is being seriously tested. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN Red List, West African chimpanzees are endangered, meaning that the maximum population reduction over a 3-generation period is suspected to exceed 50%. The number of West African chimpanzees range today between 19,000 and 60,000 individuals, which corresponds roughly to the population size of Canterbury in 2011. The greatest number of chimpanzees in West Africa can be found in Guinea. But the West African ecological, demographical, political, and socio-economic landscape is being shaped also significantly by non-local drivers. Many countries of the region offer plenitude of natural resources and fertile land, stimulating huge interest from multinational companies and national governments. Mining, logging, agricultural, commercial interests are rife. Such projects typically fuel population growth as perceived opportunities for employment attract in migration. This influx usually significantly modifies the demography and the cultural and religious makeup of localities, putting at risk any local and traditional environmentally friendly practices and taboos that may be protecting chimpanzees, wildlife, and ecosystems locally. Vegetable oils are amongst the most rapidly expanding agricultural sectors. With a global production of 45 million tons in 2010, the oil palm is by far the most productive oil crop, and on its own is capable of meeting global demand for vegetable oils, which is predicted to reach 240 million tons by 2050. At present, demand for oil palm is largely met by 2 oil palm producers, Indonesia and Malaysia, but at a high cost to biodiversity, including the only non-African great ape, the orangutan. In some African countries, propitious to oil palm and other large-scale agricultural developments such as Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, we estimated that more than 2/3 of the land suitable for oil palm development is located outside protected areas and overlaps with areas of chimpanzee presence. Should such development transpire, we have concluded that it is likely to exacerbate chimpanzee decline significantly in coming years, especially in Liberia and Sierra Leone, which are also two strongholds for the West African subspecies alongside Guinea. In our article where we conducted this analysis, we have referred to this as the homecoming of the oil palm. Why homecoming? Many people do not know that the oil palm is actually native to West Africa, and its spread from west to east can be attributed to intentional human dispersal. Recent or past human presence is often a good indicator of oil palm occurrence in forest habitats, since the wild or feral oil palm often dominate fallow and cultivated fields, as well as abandoned or recent human settlements. The oil palm also thrives in gallery and secondary forests. Chimpanzees across their range vary in their uses of the wild oil palm. But for some communities, particularly in West Africa, the oil palm is a keystone resource which they depend on for food and for nesting. Chimpanzees make a nest in trees every night. Here's an example of an adult male feeding on oil palm fruit. Here is a young adult female with her offspring at Bossou, cracking oil palm nuts using a stone, hammer and anvil in a recently cleared area for local cultivation. But contrary to small-scale, gradual and cyclical habitat changes, which some chimpanzee communities have experienced for generations, the expansion of large-scale commercial activities will imply rapid land conversion, to which chimpanzees might not be able to adapt. As large expanses of land are clear-felled and their natural resources are wiped out. Chimpanzees will be compelled to compete with humans and forage on human cultivars for their survival, which is already occurring in some areas, thus increasingly facing human exposure, which can have devastating consequences. Indeed, chimpanzees succumb to many diseases that affect humans. A study from Johns Hopkins University in the United States by Wolf and colleagues in the late 90s numbered at least 140 diseases of variable virulence shared by both humans and other great apes. Here's an example of an adult female at Bossou who lost her first offspring due to an outbreak of a respiratory disease. She continued to care and carry the dead body of her infant for several weeks, leading to it becoming mummified, and highlighting also the strong maternal bond that exists in chimpanzees. Habitat degradation and fragmentation, but also increased accessibility to remote areas through associated infrastructure such as roads and railways can result in significant declines in chimpanzee populations and depreciation of their genetic health. Evidence suggests that increased accessibility and local human demographic growth inevitably increases anthropogenic pressures, especially stimulating bushmeat hunting. Due to low chimpanzee population densities and their slow reproductive rates, adult female chimpanzees will only produce an infant every 5 to 6 years. Hunting often results in a rapid local extirpation of chimpanzee populations. Habitat loss and fragmentation is also associated with increased reports of chimpanzees foraging on crops across their range and in an increase in negative attitudes of people towards chimpanzees. Such situations of resource competition with people are expected to increase, posing serious risks of deliberate killing and retaliation and rates of capture of young chimpanzees fueling the pet trade as a result of people's intolerance to crop offtake. However, one must not forget that most farmers in this region are subsistence farmers. So damages to subsistence crops also run a risk of seriously affecting local people's livelihoods. People are also less likely to be tolerant of damage or loss to cash crops, such as pineapple, as depicted here, as these may provide people with their only source of monetary income. Retaliation, however, and aggressive crop protection measures can also elicit changes in chimpanzee behavior. Chimpanzees may then act more aggressively when encountering humans, thus aggravating their relationship with people. In some ways, we can see this as a vicious circle. Even if the causes of decline of West African chimpanzees are largely understood, they have certainly not ceased and are not easily reversible, and face conservationists today with a great challenge which we alone cannot address. Chimpanzee conservation and that of other wildlife and natural ecosystems vital to local, regional, national, global well-being, health and economy is and should be an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary endeavour, crucially also involving both local and national stakeholders. But the challenges remain fierce, the questions do remain. Can chimpanzees and people coexist? Is chimpanzee conservation compatible with large-scale development, which unavoidably many of these countries need to undergo and deserve to undergo? And how do we reconcile conservation of wild populations and the welfare of illegally captured orphan individuals? Just to name a few, some solutions may include better land use planning, improved legal and governance structures, better evaluations, oversight and monitoring of social and environmental impacts of large-scale industrial enterprises, better understanding of ecological and behavioral changes in both people and chimpanzees, improvements in environmentally friendly agricultural practices, and careful selection of the types of crops being cultivated. But the clock is ticking. Like in the Planet of the Apes, could one ever blame Tua and his descendants for also fighting for their rights? As the liberal intellectual Chimpanzees in Pierre Boulle's novel would say, reasonable humans? Bearers of wisdom? Humans inspired by the soul? No, that's not possible. Or is it? Thank you very much.